Here we go. Okay. This is Tim Martin from the Falmouth Genealogical Society. Welcome to our YouTube live stream for this is December, and our monthly meeting this time consists of something that we're calling Stories and Artifacts from Home. And so we have a few of our FGS members, Falmouth Genealogical Society members, sharing some of the nuggets and things of interest that they have. And so we have Clyde and Deb are going to go first. So have fun, Clyde and Deb.
So I guess I'm going to begin. And I think I managed to pull a share screen if people can see it. And the artifact, which I'll show you in a few minutes, is something that was my grandfather's. My grandfather was Joshua Littleford. As you can see, born in 1877. He was one of 11 children. He was the eldest. Born in Salt Lake City, sometime around 1935, moved down to San Diego, but lived in Salt Lake all up until that time. He died in 1974. Joshua Littleford, grandpa to me, was the only grandparent I ever knew because he was the only of the 4 grandparents that was still alive when I was born. Let's see, we've got, well, down here. There we go. I'm going to go back to screen sharing and stop that share and go to another one.
It just got big. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a family photo. There was a big 91st birthday party for Grandpa. This is Grandpa right here. This is pictured with his siblings. And as you can see, I've not managed to identify most of the siblings in this photograph, despite a fair amount of trying. It's a project we're still working on. This is how he looked as I remember him. And go to a different photo. And this is a photo of Joshua, his wife, Clara Mabel Peck, and 2 daughters at that time. They ultimately were 3. The eldest daughter here is my mother. But the artifact I wanted to show you is Grandpa worked most of his life as a pattern maker. And in those days, pattern making was essentially making the pattern. What he did was made the pattern carved out of wood for sand casting to make gears and other mechanical components. And I never have found out yet the name of the company he worked for in Salt Lake. In San Diego, he ultimately went to work for what was then called Consolidated Aircraft, which later became Convair in the aircraft industry. But the artifact, if you can see it here in the camera, is my very conservative grandfather, I have since learned, was a union man. And this is his union book. This is the bylaws of the Pattern Makers Guild. This particular book got a 1915 date in it. And it contains all the bylaws and rules and procedures for the union. It's small, as you can see next to my hand, so you could put it in your pocket. And although it says Pattern Makers League, when you read the book, it definitely was a union. They talk about wage parity, hours, and all that kind of union type topic. And I wished I'd known he was a union guy when he was alive, because he was conservative enough at that time that I wouldn't have thought that was my grandfather in his younger days. Along with that book, I found, this is a catalog. It says shafting, dating from early 1900s of parts. It's probably hard to see on the screen, but it's a catalog of mechanical parts, gears and wheels, probably the kind of thing he made. This company is in Philadelphia, so I don't know if this is the company he worked for and they had a branch in Salt Lake, or whether he just had this. But it's a kind of an interesting catalog, and a lot of these kinds of things that are in it are still made today, although a lot of it is the big pulley wheels from the old shafts you see in old factories with the old overhead shafts and the big leather belts all over the place that you don't see anymore. But a lot of that is in this catalog. The third thing is called is a children's book. It's called The Trials of a Small Boy. And the frontispiece is his name and the date 1888. He would have been 11 by then, so this could be his handwriting. I don't know. This is the outside of the book. The book's pretty fragile, so I've not attempted to read it. Anyway, that's my part of it. And Deb has something from her family.
Okay.
Let me get, okay. Yeah.
I've got my grandmother. This is my mother's mother's engagement ring, except that it's not, it is a ring, but not one to wear on your finger. Let's see, where do I get it?
Yeah.
It's a circle pin. And on the back of it is engraved HBV, which is my grandfather's initials and my grandmother's initials, and August 24th, 1912 -1913. I'm not quite sure what that year span is, but how they met was my grandfather was a commercial traveler. He sold paint. And the story is that they met on a streetcar. She got on the streetcar and he was doodling circles on whatever piece of paper he had in front of him. And they got to talking, and but of course they got each other's names, but of course he couldn't ask her out because he hadn't been properly introduced to her. So he had to find somebody in town. Now he came from Staten Island, and she was in probably the streetcar was somewhere between Buffalo and Fredonia, New York. So he had to find somebody to properly introduce them so they could have an official date. So, which he did. And so that I suspect that the August 24th, 1912 is probably the day they met, and maybe the August 24th, 1913 is their sort of when they officially got engaged, and they were married the 3rd of December in 1914. And unfortunately, the marriage lasted a little more than 4 years because she died in the influenza epidemic in 1919, 2 days after giving birth to my uncle. So that's, there's a picture of her. And a picture of my grandfather.
So Deb, in that picture of her, she was wearing a mask, right? Is that what I saw?
No, no, she
No.
doesn't.
Oh, okay, fine. I just didn't
Not
see.
a mask.
It's
All right,
a
fine.
mask.
I'm sorry.
But the dress that she is wearing in that picture,
A wedding
Um,
dress.
I wore when Clyde and I got married.
Yeah.
Her wedding dress. When my mother died and my sister and I went through stuff, we found some fabric marked mother's wedding dress. Clearly, she had cut it up for something and was going to make something else out of it. And we looked at this and we go, no, we can't even tell the inside from the outside. That's like so much for that. But that dress was kept and so I wore it for when we got married. That's my story.
Great.
Nice.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on Deb or Clyde's words?
What brought Clyde's grandfather to Salt Lake City?
He was born there.
What about his parents then?
Okay, so his parents separately were part of the Mormon migration.
Okay.
My great grandfather, Seth Littleford, came from England.
Yes, I
And my
noticed that.
grandmother, Annie Jane Keyser, spelled any of a number of ways, or possibly D. Keyser, we don't quite know, came from Holland.
Interesting.
The even more interesting thing is that so that they were obviously both Mormons, and then they were Mormons when my grandfather was born. But when my grandfather was 11, all of at that time, the children that they had were all on the same day baptized in the Episcopal Church in Salt Lake at St. Mark's.
So there's the story right there.
Yeah, I'd love to find out that story. We're working on that. Interestingly enough, St. Mark's Cathedral, which is the main Episcopal church in Salt Lake, was completed before the Mormon Temple was completed.
Huh. That's interesting too.
And with money from the Mormon church.
We've visited that church, and their historians, people have told us that Brigham Young contributed $5,000 to the construction of the Episcopal Church.
Wow.
And his reason was he'd rather have people find God anywhere than not at all.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
And my parents were married in that church, although not in the actual church, because the church had, shortly before my parents got married, had burned. And the church was using a building across the street to hold services, which is where my parents were actually married. And the church was rebuilt and is going strong.
Great.
The other mystery is, why did my grandfather around between 1930 and 1935 move to San Diego? That I haven't found out yet.
Probably for the weather.
Probably. I mean, the thing is by that time, my father moved to California in the 20s, and the courtship was remote, and then they got married about 1935, and he was already living in Los Angeles all that time. So my parents were living in Los Angeles, but my grandfather went all the way to San Diego, didn't come to Los Angeles.
Well, it might have been a position in the aerospace industry, pattern making for a company there.
Well, because there's a lot of it in LA. The story on him working at Convair is that, of course, he was fairly old by the time he took that job. Born in 1877, and that was around 1935.
Yeah.
They thought he was, the family story that I have is they thought he was too old to do the job.
Yeah.
And so he told them, okay, I'll work for you one day for free. And at the end of that day, you can either tell me I can't do it or you can hire me. They hired him.
Wow, that's a good one too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, Eleanor, how would you? Are you able to go next? I'm going to ask you to unmute there. There you are.
Well, I don't know if I'm unmuted, am I?
Yes, you are. We can hear you now.
Okay. I'm going to tell a small story about my family. I never was particularly interested in genealogy till I got a letter from a cousin telling me some interesting facts. So my family was 12 generations of the Gould family lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and they all spread out eventually, but they still mostly their place was in Boston. But they were very progressive people. The first, they were 6 men named Thomas Gould in the family. They named everybody Thomas, Thomas, Thomas all the way down. It was hard to keep them straightened out. But at any rate, the first one was a founder in the King's Chapel, the first Episcopal church in Boston and New England. And the second one, he wanted to, the Tremont Temple is world famous as the first integrated church in America. And Thomas, one of the Thomases, were very involved in getting that church started out. And he reached out his hand of friendship to the Negroes to found a church on equality. They were an unusual family, and there was a lot of interesting facts that I found out. My husband and I used to go visit his aunt in Sudbury, Mass, and I used to always go to the libraries. So the Goodnow Library in Sudbury, I was flipping through a couple of magazines, the Massachusetts magazine of genealogical genealogy, and here's my family. Somebody is looking for exactly the same family where we had a brick wall. Well, that was very, very exciting, and I got in touch with him, and from there on, we discovered cousins, and that was quite exciting. And the family was very involved in the Salem witchcraft. We had witches in the family, and that was quite very, very interesting stories. We had well, you would just ask whatever you wanted to know to have. They seem to be involved in. But let me think now. So at any rate, oh dear me, just a moment, I lost my train of thought. Okay, I became very interested in this family, and when I joined the Genealogical Society years ago, we all talked a few times about, gee, I wonder if any of us are related. Well, it so happens that Mary Hunt in our group, she and I were related way back, and John Perry and I were related way back, and so you'd never know in the group how many of you are related. And then every time I'd go to the meetings that they had every 2 years, I always found somebody who was related to me all the time. You know, you just get to talking about things like that. So my biggest thing was graveyards. I became obsessed with graveyards. And I had this friend that lived up in the area where my family went to eventually, and then they came back to Boston. And I said, I'm going to go up and visit my family. And she said, well, where are they? And I said, well, they're up the road and they're in the graveyard, but I want to see them. Well, something came over me when I went to find them, and I found them, and I sat down. His name was Uriah Fletcher and Lydia. And I sat down, and it's as if they said, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you were looking for me. And it's a very, very powerful feeling, having that and sitting there. And I had a cup of tea, and I sat there, and I felt as if I really knew them. It's hard to explain. But I had a lot of dreams about this, and I said, you know, they were real people. They weren't just something in a book. It wasn't anything they were alive. And I don't know if anybody's ever had that feeling, but it was a very strong feeling. And I had a lot of happenings like that through my life in different graveyards that I had visited, and it's as if they all said, you didn't forget about me. I really am. I really was here. I really made a difference. And So it's absolutely possessed me. When I first started in, I dreamed that there were pilgrims on my bedspread. I dreamed there were pilgrims everywhere. I dreamed there were all about the family. I became obsessed. Nobody wanted to talk to me because all they wanted to do was talk about family. And did you hear this? Did you hear that? And so forth and so on. But the family was very progressive, and it was a very exciting family. And I found Mayflower people. I found Catherine Lee Bates. I found so many people that I was related to, which was such a surprise when I was digging into all this. And I've enjoyed the journey, and I hope I'm still around to have the journey because it's meant a lot to me.
Yeah, Eleanor has been a president of Falmouth Genealogical Society. Any questions?
Something to show? He's forgotten.
Oh, Eleanor, did you have anything to an artifact or not? That's all.
Yeah, well, I know I didn't
That's
get that
fine.
out, but I had a few, but that's fine.
That's fine. Okay.
I had several, but that's all right.
Thanks very much.
That was wonderful.
Yes,
That was good, Eleanor. Thank you for sharing that.
good.
Hey, Deb, my wife Deb is going to give a presentation. So Deb, you go ahead and start talking. And when the time comes, I'll come over and turn your screen sharing on. How about that? Is that okay?
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. I'm honored to be Tim's wife. He's really gotten me into this genealogy thing I never would have done. And I just want to acknowledge him because he is really responsible for this. He's helped me to discover much of the information that I'm going to show you today. This stuff was all passed on through my mother's side of the family. Elizabeth Baker Spohr. And it comes because she was her grandmother, Mary Elizabeth Baker, was an only child. Her father, was an only child. And then beyond that, most of the family members were only children. So they only had one person to pass all these amazing things down to. So we collected them in a big box, and Tim starts pulling these things out one after the other. And I've become so excited about them that I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to use photographs of all these objects in this book. I think it's kind of focused as a children's book because my grandfather was on shipboard and he kept a journal. And we have that little journal. I'll be showing you a picture of it. And
What happened?
There you go. I'm sorry.
okay, they didn't hear anything?
No, just
Yeah, we heard it.
Okay,
But-
great.
But
So
Eleanor,
now I want to show my pictures now.
Tim, Eleanor keeps coming on full screen on mine.
yeah, I know, and I was
Interrupting
trying.
Deb.
I know I was trying to mute her, and I accidentally muted Deb instead. That's what happened. So, unfortunately, hold on. Let me get Eleanor here. There you go. Now Deb will be on. Whoop,
No,
Eleanor, keep yourself muted, okay?
How do I get my pictures?
There you go, Deb. I'll come over now.
I push the Zoom button. Okay. There's Eleanor again.
hi, Eleanor.
Hold on, Eleanor, keep yourself muted, okay? Just leave it alone right now. Just leave it right there, and I'll go back to Deb now. Okay, you want to share your screen, Deb? Is that right?
Yes.
There.
Share screen. Okay, here we go.
Oh, you want to go to photo 1 though?
Yeah.
So let me
Oh,
go-
that's the last photo.
I know. Let's go back to the first photo. There you go.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. Tim showed these photos, some of them already at his talk about the crocodile. So this is my great-grandfather. His name was Benjamin Baker, and he was a ship captain. His home was in Middleborough and in Brewster. He married my great-grandmother, who is on the right here, and she was Mary Elizabeth Tucker Baker. And these paintings, we believe, were painted in China. They visited many ship ports, and they tell me that we know these paintings are painted in China by the hands, because this is typically the way the Chinese painters painted hands. People think, also, I'd just like you to note the jewelry. We have the jewelry still in our family. My grandfather's pocket watch that's hanging on his lapel there. And my grandmother has a necklace, I think is one that I'll be showing you, but I'm not 100% sure. And okay, so I'll go to the next slide. Where's the button to push?
This right here, this button here.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is a painting, a photograph of my grandfather, Benjamin Baker. So you can kind of imagine from the painting, he's not quite as dressed up here. Next picture. Okay. This is a photograph of my great-grandmother when she was quite young. I'm not sure she had already married my grandfather by that time. She was Mary Elizabeth Baker. My mother said it took her 2 names in order to, she was such a strong woman in her own right. And so my mother was given the name Elizabeth, and her sister was given the name Mary to carry her namesake. Next. This is a painting of the Memnon, which is the first boat that my great-grandfather captained. He was very young. I've heard he was one of the youngest captains ever. He's in his very early 20s. The captain of this boat, which was, let's see, Freeman, I believe. His name, he died on board this boat. He got some kind of disease in between Batavia and Manila. I believe that's it. Yeah, Batavia is Indonesia and Manila. So Benjamin was first mate of this boat, and he took over when this Captain Horace Freeman passed away on shipboard. This painting was in my family. It still is. And you can see the top left-hand corner has a groove in it because our house caught fire here on the Cape. And this painting half burned, and my mother decided to save the painting, which I'm very glad she did. We saved half the painting that did not get burned. So this is the ship Memnon. This is their prayer book. Much of it has scripture in it. Let's see. I'm lost here in my notes. But this, we have the book here, and when you open this up, here it is right here. Oh my gosh, it's so old. It's when you open it up, it falls open to the burial page because they use that page so much on shipboard. So this is the whole sermon, or what they would read, I guess, before they threw the bodies overboard. So next. My grandmother was an incredible writer. My great-grandmother, Mary Elizabeth. This is the first page of her second journal on the Memnon. You can see she's written here February 2nd, 1871. She was in Boston and she was on the ship Memnon, which is the ship I just showed you, the painting that half burned. And then she looks to San Francisco, and I can't read all the other places.
Find it for you.
I have written these in notes. I'm very discombobulated. Anyway, so there were other towns, I think in Germany and Boston. They finally ended up in Boston in looks like March 29th, 1869. It was a 16-month voyage around the world. That is her first. We have journals of all the voyages from her perspective because she kept journals, and we have them all, and Tim is starting to transcribe them, and I'm going to show you a page handwritten in her journal, what her writing was like. It's beautiful handwriting, but very difficult to read if you don't really know what you're reading. And so I'm going to read to you one of the pages, this page from her journal, and it's July 17th, and it's 1870. They encountered many different storms. And so this is a description of a storm they went through. The squall succeeded squall all the morning, heavy and fast. Just at noon, there came a white squall, which shivered our timbers. And for a moment, we knew not what the result might be. All were unharmed, but aloft, the wreck was fearful. All the sails, white and new, were rent to ribbons, and the ropes were parted. The sheets lost overboard, and our cross-jack yard rent in twain. All the hands were hard at work. Thus ends our Sabbath. Monday, July 18th. Rain, rain, squall, squall, toss, tumble, pitch, bang. Oh dear, shall we ever another quiet, pleasant day? I have scrawled 50 wrinkles into my forehead this passage, grunted all the wind out of my lungs, and spoiled my good disposition. Oh, for a lodge, but not in a wilderness. Tuesday, July 19th, latitude 28, longitude 1 or something. Thank God for this day. The sun is bright and warm. The old ocean is rather rough, but I've actually taken a long breath. Our broken bones have been replaced today by timber from California. Old Memnon's dress will require more time for repairs. She flirted too severely with her coquettish admirer on Sunday and was repaid for her disregard of the day by his laughing at her vanity, boxing her ears, and tearing her gown. So that is one, you can see what an incredible writer she was. And I'm looking forward to just reading all of these journals that we have that once Tim gets to transcribing them. So here is the next ship my great-grandfather's Benjamin Baker was captain of. It is the William H. Bessie. We have this hanging over our fireplace. It's a bark, quite a large bark. You can see the flags on it. But anyway, their whole family was on board, my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, and my grandfather, who was a little boy at this time. You can see at the corner, the right-hand corner, is a picture of my mother standing in front of her grandfather's boat, or her father's boat. All three of them were on board this ship. And on the left is a painting, it's a photograph of the ship in front of the Cahoon Museum of Art. And the Garden Club made displays to reflect the image of the ship. And you can see the flower arrangement in front of the ship there. Okay, next. This is my great-grandfather Benjamin's ship captain chair. We have this in our home. We have an Airbnb here, and so it's on the other side, on the Airbnb side of our home. My grandmother was a very short woman, and so when she inherited this chair from her father, who was a little boy on the Bessie, she cut the legs down so they're shorter because she was more comfortable in that chair that way. This is another front page of her diary on the Bessie. This, I'm not sure which diary this is 1878. This is the front cover. I just thought the cover was so interesting. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next page. This is Sidney, my grandfather, Sidney Tucker Baker, as a little boy, about the time he was on board this ship. It was taken in Middleborough, this picture, in his, I'm sure his finest clothes. I don't know if they borrowed the clothes or what. But anyway, that was him at about 9 or 10 years old. I think it was probably the time they were then going back onto the Bessie. I think they were not a wealthy family. They could not afford a home of their own. So they would always return to relatives' homes in between passages on the Bessie. So they went to Middleborough sometimes, and sometimes they went to Brewster. This is my grandfather, Sidney Tucker Baker. The family lore is this photograph we have was taken in Hong Kong, but it says Sunderland, which is Sunderland, England, the studio. And they did go through England many times. And so I believe, I don't know how this was taken in England, if it was also taken in Hong Kong. But anyway, that is him, you know, that's probably how he looked more like on the shipboard. This is my grandfather, Sidney's journal as a little boy. And it's really quite amazing. His handwriting, I can read it. So these are the books he had. We have these upstairs. These are all Shakespeare, editions of Shakespeare that he studied. He also studied the Bible. Those were his textbooks. His father taught him math through shipping, you know, I don't know all the details, but he would help keep records of, anyway, Tim wants me to go on, I can't go on. Okay, this is a picture of his journal, and this is how he wrote. I'm not going to read it to you, it just doesn't, it takes too much time, but I really like his handwriting because I can read it, and I have transcribed this whole journal. This is one of the, I mentioned in the painting, this is one of the pieces of jewelry. Perhaps my grandmother was wearing these. I imagine these pieces were purchased. These to me look Russian. And this is my great grandfather's timepiece. You can see the little key that he, at the bottom there, that he used to wind it up. And this was also in that first painting that I showed you. This, I think for a ship captain, having a very good timepiece was really important to determine their location and things like that. This was my grandfather, Mary Elizabeth Tucker Baker, her pin. We inherited and we looked at it, we thought, what the heck is this thing? And my mother told me it was 2 tiger claws end to end. And in the middle to join them is a bird that's been shot through with a golden arrow. You can see the arrow of this. So that was purchased in Calcutta, India. Now, this is a picture of the Nauset Beach Light Station from the sea. You can see the Three Sisters lighthouses. They were known at that time as the Three Sisters. And And this is what my grandmother records in one of her journals, seeing after one of these very long worldwide voyages coming back to Cape Cod. And this was the voyage right after the explosion of Krakatoa. She records that she was being, I'll show you the next picture. She saw these lighthouses, and she records she was being pulled by the hawser, which is the largest rope on the ship, often used for towing. I took a picture of this hawser at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. Just wanted you to see how big this rope was. And when she used that image, the imagery of her heart being pulled by a hawser back to Cape Cod, you can tell how much she missed home. Now, these are the Three Sisters lighthouses. They are not the original. They might be somewhat original, but they've been rebuilt, and they have been moved away from the cliff. They are no longer at the cliffside in Pete Provincetown. But these are them, and I was so delighted to see them. So I took this picture because Mary Elizabeth recorded such amazing account of seeing these and how excited she was to come back to the United States of America. And here is a picture in our living room. Right behind me is a mirror that was purchased in Russia on the Bessie, brought back to the United States. And I have it now. And this was shocking to me. I was thinking about writing this book. I wanted to paint some of these images, and then I discovered this in my attic of my garage. And I went to Newport, Rhode Island, and I went on the tour to the basement where I saw trunks just like this and dated around the early mid 1800s, and I was shocked. So I went back to my attic, and these were the same trunks I had seen in Rhode Island, the same type, era, you know what I mean. So this just made me so excited that I had, and so from there I started opening my eyes to looking around my house to seeing, well, what else do I have from the Bessie? And this was another thing. In my attic, I have a huge set of this type of china. Tim, you took my paper. Oh, well, I'll do it from memory. This is Flow Blue. I'm a potter, so I'm very interested in this piece. And it is it's a piece of pottery that is produced in England, Staffordshire, England, where you saw the photograph taken. So I'm sure they picked this up when they were on board, off land in England. And it's called Flow Blue because when it's fired, the glazes run. And at first they thought it was not so desirable, but then people began to really like this blue glaze that kind of ran into each other, the blues, and it became very popular. And on the back is the stamp of the town. It's called, I think it is Staffordshire, England or something on the back, which substantiates my great-grandmother's journals. This, I'm going to show you a series of paintings. These were all, I believe they were purchased in China when they were in port in China. And these are prints, and they have been watercolored over. So they're print probably black and white, and then an artist comes and paints over them, but they're printed on rice paper. That's why their rice paper is very fragile, and there's that crack along the top. And I don't know what kind of fish these are, but I would imagine my great-grandmother talked about flying fish in her journals and all different types of fish. So I imagine maybe they purchased this because the fish represented things they had seen at sea. Here, I think this was probably purchased by them. This is another rice paper print of the boats that they saw in Hong Kong Harbor and also in China, in the harbors in China. And again, it's watercolored over, but quite beautiful. This is another print, a Chinese print that they purchased. We have about 5 of these in our bedroom. This is another rice paper print. I think this is interesting because these Chinese are shown. I've done some research, and these boxes were often tea. They were picking up tea in China, tea leaves, you know, to make tea. And tea was such an important thing in England and even in the United States. So these Chinese men are packaging up boxes of tea. This is the home of my, well, this was the grandfather of Benjamin Baker home in Brewster, ship captain home of Isaac Clark. Now, was also the home of my grandfather's great-grandfather, Isaac Clark. And whenever they came back to the United States, this was the home they would come to in between voyages, often to spend a few months in. And it's still owned by family members. And so we have the liberty to go in, and beautiful wallpapers in there from the 1800s. It's an amazing home. This is the final slide, and Tim, it's documented, you know, different places in the journals that their home port was the Narrows of Wareham. So we, Tim figured out how to get and find the Narrows of Wareham, and this is exactly where the Bessie would come into the United States and pull up here and dock. And they are trying, this park where the cars are parked are called the Bessie Park, named after the boat. And they are trying to restore this area. You can see on the left-hand corner these large boulders, which probably were the original surface of the port area, you can see. Okay, so that's all I have. And I just want to say thank you again to my husband, Tim, who has enlightened me on so many wonderful things about my family.
Thank you. I think my wife Judy and I had a picnic at that Wareham Pier. That Wareham dock is just at the south end of town, near the hospital. And
Yes,
there's a railroad track at the northern edge of it that goes across.
exactly.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually it's named after the Bessie family, who was you know, Alden Bessie and others were living in Wareham at the time. And so it's the family, Bessie family members are there. But let me I want to point out one thing, and then is simply here you know, I married this lady, and, you know, my genealogy, my pedigree tree for 5 generations is Indiana farmers, pretty much every branch. And so, and later in my life, as I get interested in genealogy, look what I discover in my wife's line. You know, how rich is that?
I also wanted to share, Tim wanted to share these daguerreotypes originals that we have. You can't really hardly see them, but anyway, we have these daguerreotypes. That one is of my great-grandfather, Benjamin, who is the ship captain, and this is a daguerreotype of my where's the camera? Here.
Right there.
My great-grandmother, when she was a little girl with her mother and father. Remember, she was an only child. And then we have a book, which is Brewster Shipmasters by J. Henry Sears. And Tim said many of you know this man, the Sears. And so this is the ship captain book, and my grandfather signed the front of it. And it lists all the great ships of that era. In the first page or so, they just have a description of all the different ships here. So we want to show those to you too. Okay, that's it.
Very good.
Wow.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, let me think here. Let me just make some comments that, you know, this is a very great session sharing together, and certainly we're happy to hang on here and have any conversation that you wish. I'm going to shortly here cut the YouTube live stream. And before that, I'm thinking of saying a couple of things. One is just to refer to you the Roots Tech Conference. If you're interested, it's a great conference that frequently, but this coming year, February 25th through 27th, for the first time, it is free and virtual. So check that out. And then finally, I just want to review our calendar. See if I can do this properly. Oh, I need to, just a second. Here we go. Just a minute. Stand by. I'm not going to hold on. I'm confusing myself. I just want to show you our calendar. Oh, that's not going to work. Golly. I'm definitely a guy who...
You remember it. Tim, you know it off the top of your head.
Fine. You know, okay, that's a good idea.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Deb, and I'll get myself organized.
I'm going to give this little talk to Lively Arts, a group of artists that I'm part of. And we have Zoom meetings once a month. Is there anything you can suggest I could do better to help them appreciate this talk a little better? Any comments from you all? Did I probably talked too fast? I don't know what, but.
Deb, I thought you did very well. You spoke very clearly, concisely, well organized. You showed the photos, the pictures, the art. I thought it was well put together. I think you'll do a great job. The only thing